So in the last video, we got the car running. It runs really well actually. Idles really well, I guess I should say. And it revs up okay by throttling it while it's in idle. We really can't tell if it has any power or if it's making any horsepower under load or if it runs okay. So we're gonna try to take it for a drive, but to do that we gotta do a couple things. First off, we gotta fix the fuel system. We're just running it out of a gas tank sitting right here for now so we don't run any dirty fuel through it. But there's a drain bolt on the bottom of the gas tank, so we're gonna drop that and drain all that out, and we're gonna run some fuel through it just to see if any rust or any crud comes through. But I think it's gonna be okay. And then I'm gonna reattach all these lines. We're not gonna use the old lines that came with it. This is an example of one, and they're very rotted and brittle. So I have new fuel line like this that I'm just gonna run from everything, and we're gonna get rid of this clear line. And we're gonna keep the inline fuel filter just in case anything dirty comes through. It's glass, we can see it, and we've got replaceable parts there. I'm gonna take this little filter off because I imagine this is probably gummed up with some sort of fuel, stuck on fuel. So I'm gonna take that out before, and we'll get a little adapter, a hose barb to thread into that and go onto our fuel line. We'll get that from Ace Hardware, is typically where I go. Now, to do a test drive, we don't care about a fan shroud really. The other thing that we need to do for a test drive is we got to check the transmission for fluid level and the rear diff. We're going to check the differential to make sure it has enough fluid in there. And we'll probably change the oil before we do that as well, but not super necessary. Those are the main things. I want to get the fuel system set up so it's not leaking anymore and we don't run any crap into the carb and clog it up anymore. So I want to see if the carb runs okay, otherwise we got to replace the carb. But that's what we're gonna do now, is I'm gonna clean up this fuel system delivery deal, and I'm gonna hook it back up to the old factory lines and get real fuel line in place of this clear stuff, and then we will go. So there's the drain plug on the bottom of the gas tank. We dropped the fuel and it looked fine. There really wasn't much left in there. We had been running this gas, or this car, this engine on the pawn shop gas, or in the pawn yard, and it ran fine and it looked relatively clear enough, just kind of old and yellowy. So we're gonna fill it up with some new gas now and then continue hooking up the lines. So you might be wondering why the mosquito net in the middle of, well, beginning of March actually. It's still freezing out here. But I found it in the back of my 4Runner, and we took this truck out to a campground this past summer and got eaten alive by mosquitoes. And this thing was in there the entire time. So this would have been really helpful to have. So I felt like I'd throw it on just to at least get some use out of it. But we are going to throw it out 5 gallons of gas. We're just gonna put it in here. Yeah, that pretty much should be it. And we can finish hooking up the lines. Oh, it's gonna take a while. We are gonna bleed the brakes before we try to take it for a spin because they're pretty spongy. Now, before I try to mess with these bleeder valves, which are right here, it's this guy, the bleeder nipple, and then there's the brake line. I'm gonna shoot them with some penetrating oil and just let that sit and soak for a little bit before I try to mess with it so that it hopefully doesn't strip anything out. Now, a lot of this stuff has, I guess, cat hair or some sort of fur all over it. So I'm finding myself having to take a wire brush to pretty much everything ahead of time. There's the fill bolt. Give it a penetrating. That should come out. We got this to break free. This is the fill bolt on the passenger side of our transmission. We have a 4-speed for it, so we're not really going to keep this transmission, but we just don't really want to, don't want to mess it up, don't want to drive it dry, and we don't have to. I guess I really should have a bucket down here. I just can't imagine that it would be overfilled after sitting for so many years. And there it goes. Alright, so it's not overfilled. Alright, let's see how underfilled it is. All I really do is just shove my finger in there and then, ow. Okay, so we hit fluid pretty much immediately, and it smells like gear oil. Seems fine in my book. We're gonna run it. That looks okay to me. Transmission, check. Now we're gonna bust open the rear diff. We're not gonna do the brake lines tonight because I think we're gonna have a real terrible time messing with the brake lines. I'm pretty sure all of those bleeder valves are probably going to break. I gotta imagine they're going to snap off. They're very small and there's a bit of rust on them and it looks a little corroded. So we will hope that it doesn't break, but I got a feeling it will. Onto the rear diff. Love it. Right now we are sagged down a bit, so it probably will be a little bit low. Okay, so we got the fill plug out. Now keep in mind, we're not flat on the ground right now, we're up in the air. So the differential has gotten, when it sags down, when it's not on the ground, it's gonna be pointed up more than it normally would. So you will be lower than you normally would. And yeah, we got plenty of fluid in there and it actually looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks relatively, it's not bad at all. Almost looks new. Weird. So we are going to pop this back in, and really it's just brakes. Brakes are the big issue right now. Okay, we are bleeding the brakes here before we try to take it for a spin. Can you see any of this stuff? The bleeder valve up top?
Yep.
So there's the brake line, and then here's the bleeder. We're probably gonna break all these off. I assume they're rusted solid. We'll find out right now if any of these are gonna wanna come out. But
What size are you using?
this is a 1/4, and I think this is the right size, but it's really hard to tell. There's a bunch of crud on here. That doesn't seem good. But the idea here is you're gonna start farthest away from the master cylinder, and I might try to crack them all and just let them free bleed for a bit to get all the old brake fluid out of the lines. And then what you're going to do is tighten them all back up. You're gonna have someone in the driver's seat pumping on the pedal a couple times, and they're gonna hold the pedal down with their foot, and then you're gonna crack the bleeder valve lefty-loosey until fluid and air squirts out of it. And then you just and then you tighten it back up, and then the person in the driver's seat lets their foot off the brake. So make sure they don't let their foot off the brake while you have the bleeder valve open, otherwise you'll suck air back into the system, which is what you're trying to purge. So you just repeat that process over and over and over again until you're able to get all the air out of the system. And then you start with the wheel that's farthest away from the master cylinder, then you go to the passenger side rear, and then you go to the driver's side rear, and then you go to the passenger side front, and then the driver's side front is the last wheel. Now some of these bleeder valves are pretty rusted, so I don't think we're gonna have any luck getting them off, but we're gonna give it a shot here. That's the plan. Okay, so we are bleeding the brakes. Here's the front. If it would focus, you see how that's bubbling right now? Right there. You need to get rid of all those bubbles. So if we zoom out, well, let's zoom out. We're basically underneath the car. We're bleeding each wheel, starting with the furthest away from the master cylinder. And we're just gravity bleeding them right now. So I just cracked them and got them all open. But we're gonna try to get them to stop bubbling just by gravity bleeding, and then we'll go with the pump method. We've got some air bubbles coming out of this one as well. You can see right on the tip of the bleeder valve. Nothing coming out of this one actually yet. Tiny bit of a bubble in the beginning, but probably just some pressure bleeding off with the PB blaster, the penetrating fluid on top of it. So I think what we're gonna do now is we're gonna let these gravity bleed for a while now, and we're gonna hook up the fuel lines while we wait. See if we can just let it bleed itself, purge the air out of its system itself without having to do anything. So we're gonna lower the car now, and we'll keep an eye. Now the big thing when you're doing this, if you're gonna let something gravity bleed, is you can go up there, but you need to make sure the master cylinder back there doesn't go below fluid level. So keep an eye on that the entire time. So right now I'm just getting a 1/8 inch hose barb attached to the front of the car because we had originally this old little fuel filter on there, but I'm sure that's gummed up and not working. So we're just putting in a hose barb here. We have an inline fuel filter that we can see through. It's glass. So we're gonna use that as our fuel filter, and we'll be able to see if we're getting any crud coming through the lines. We shouldn't be though. We're gonna leave it at that. And if it leaks, we'll start tightening stuff up more. Now here's our inline fuel filter. We got 5/16 little hose barbs, and those are the lines that we're gonna run. We're gonna have this inline right about here, and then we've got hoses going down there to the fuel pump and from the fuel line. So let's set those up and splice this in right now. Now the only thing that's left, we're out of the way of the fan. We just need to hook up from our fuel tank, which is right here, up to this line, and we still are good on brake fluid. So we're probably going to need to manually bleed these a little bit. I don't think gravity's gonna cut it all the way. Let's give this one last hookup here for our fuel line. I need about here to there. So we just finished up hooking up the rubber lines. Coming from the fuel tank into the fuel pump, mechanical unit, coming out, going to our fuel filter, glass with replaceable filters so we can see if we're getting any sort of junk caught up in there. And straight to the carb so we can really see how it runs now and if the carb is leaking or if that runs okay. So we're gonna finish bleeding the brakes now, and then we can take it for a test run and see if the carb is delivering fuel, see if the spark is okay, see if it runs well. enough. There's already a little bit of crap. Seems okay. Damn, it's shaking a bit, but I don't think we have any leaks. Fuel's starting to clean up already. Smoke coming out of down there. Probably just something on the manifold. That fuel filter is catching a lot of crap. You can see it in there. See all that rusty? If you look down in there, you can see a lot of floating crap. See all that orange stuff in there and then some up there. That is rust or old hardened fuel coming through our lines. So not the best idea, not the best case there, but that's a replaceable fuel filter, so we can replace that fuel filter pretty easy with another insert. We got a couple more, and we'll see from there. I'm not too sure, but I don't think it's going to be able to make any horsepower on that. So that's where we're at for now, but no leaks, so we're pretty much good on fuel. Brakes felt pretty good, so that's it for today. We may need a new fuel tank or to drop the fuel tank at some point. I hope not. We'll just see.